So, hi, leaders, followers, colleagues, and coaches to week 6 of EDU 537. So, this week is really an extension of what we talked about last week and the whole coaching model. And during this particular mini lesson and in the PowerPoint, I'm going to cover two items that hopefully will be helpful for you. One of those is the annotated bibliography reflective paper that I'm having you submit in week 9. And I'll try to describe that a little bit for you and give you some of the background and context in which that is taking place. And the second thing that I want to do is go through a PowerPoint, which is going to extend and expand some of the coaching conversations or the coaching conversation that we've talked about so far, that planning conversation. We're going to extend and expand some of those skills and some of those ideas to the reflecting conversation, the reflection conversation. That's going to take place right after your observation and as part of your overall coaching video that you'll be submitting. And also the problem solving conversation, which is another kind of walkthrough and conversation you can have with your colleagues that allow you to coach on the fly and use pace, use a way to kind of connect with your colleagues when they have particular problems or issues in the classroom that you hear about that you feel you might be able to help them out with. So these kinds of conversations might take place in the teacher's room over lunch. They might take place walking down the hall. They might take place during a team meeting or during a meeting with a teacher. So you'll hear about these problems, and hopefully the coaching conversation that I'll give you a model for today will help you walk through help your colleague walk through that problem-solving methodology so that they're able to develop some solutions for that problem. So the first thing I wanted to do, as I said, is kind of talk a little bit about that annotated bibliography. So hopefully you're looking around the school. Hopefully you're looking at the website, you're looking at artifacts, you're looking at meeting minutes, you're looking at what meetings or how meetings are conducted at your school. You're visiting classes, you're substituting potentially, or you're part of the team that's involved with literacy practices. So you're discussing and developing some of these ideas. So hopefully you've developed a kind of a meaningful understanding of the alignment at the school, at the school with its mission, vision, and values, but also the alignment and the school and the potential misalignment at the school with the literacy program and that mission, vision, and values, or where you see the program that's being developed and that's being implemented in your schools maybe not meeting what students need from the perspective of that alignment overall. So you're looking for these kinds of gaps. You're looking for these kinds of needs. You're thinking about where the misalignment might be. When you've identified a misalignment, or as you're identifying a potential misalignment, this annotated bibliography is designed for you to think about the research and evidence-based practice that could intervene, that you could use to sort of fill that gap. Remember, in your organizational analysis and also in your final project, you're looking at the literacy program overall, you're looking at your school overall, and you're developing some ideas about potential ways in which any misalignment that you're seeing, any gaps that you're seeing can be shrunk and made less. You're going to base that on evidence. You're going to base that on research that you've been able to find that says, here are some potential solutions for that gap, and here are some ways in which that problem can be alleviated, or those issues can be alleviated. So you're looking for 2 research-based articles to put in your annotated bibliography. You're creating this as an annotated bibliography. I'm thinking that you've probably had some exposure to annotated bibliographies in the research course that you took over the summer. I'm going to see if I can find some models for annotated bibliographies that I could provide for you in the next week or so that you'll be able to understand exactly what that model looks like, or be reminded about how your annotated bibliography should should look, and how it should be formatted, and what it should consist of. So you're looking at two evidence-based research articles that are meant to capture your thinking about how that gap can be shrunk, how that misalignment can be made more aligned, and how your literacy program overall at your school, based on the evidence that you've accumulated, can be improved. So when you drop that particular paper, couple of pages, into your reflective group discussion board, you're going to be using the same kinds of questions that we've used and are using for all the discussion boards, those group discussion boards that we're working on for the next 5 weeks. And that is, what did you like about the article? So what kinds of things attracted you and you thought were good about this particular article that your colleague, or articles that your colleagues have chosen? And the second question is, what do you wonder about with this particular set of articles? So, how can the learning be extended? What other ideas can you think of in terms of how the research is presented, and what sort of changes you might make, or what kinds of ideas you have about how well they work? So that's going to be the conversation once you create those annotated bibliographies. As I said, they're due week 9. If you do have any questions down the road about the annotated bibliographies, if there's something you don't understand, or any of the assignments, please, by all means, drop me an email, and I'll do my best to help you solve whatever issues or whatever worries you might have, so that you're able to kind of complete this particular assignment. So next, I want to go on to cognitive coaching models, and particularly the reflection conversation and the problem-solving conversation. So this week, we're taking what we learned last week in our synchronous class, and we're extending it and expanding it a little bit to 2 different conversations that you can have as a coach. We know from Bean and Goatley that this kind of coaching of individual teachers is actually a substantial portion of most literacy specialists' job descriptions. In fact, 80% of, as we read, 80% of literacy specialists sort of have this in their job description, and are slated to be coaches, but only about 30% actually end up being coaches. And part of that is because there needs to be a framework, and there needs to be an understanding of how the coaching relationship works. Bean and Goatley give you some great ideas in chapter 7 for kind of laying the groundwork for coaching, and some of what the coaching conversations can be like. I think they match what we talked about in our classroom coaching model pretty well, in terms of having teachers talk about their performance and be able to analyze and think about how they might improve their performances. So let's look at some of these models. So what about reflection and action? So reflection is really, really critical, as we know, for practitioners in the field. And this idea of David Schoen's from 1983 was really kind of the first time that reflection for professionals got some airplay, and was thought about and regarded as an important step in the process of personal growth. So the reflection conversation is a critical conversation that you're going to have after the observation with your colleague, and is part of the whole coaching process. So we know from John Dewey that our experience is really the critical factor in any of our learning, and we need to process that experience, and that's what reflection allows us to do. As coaches, that reflection and that talk about what happened, what was the class like, summarize your impressions of what took place in the class I observed, allows your coachees, your teachers, to move beyond the episodic. So rather than just sort of thinking about the class and really sort of letting the class go, you're asking them to get into the details of what took place during the class so they can analyze what took place and how the class went, and they can begin to develop ways in which they can improve their performance as a result. So you'll remember that the coaching model is a meander. So, like the planning conversation, the reflecting conversation is not a straight shot. It you really have to sort of follow where the coachee is thinking. You've got to listen carefully. You've got to be on the balcony, right, in that non-judgmental place, and you're using various coaching behaviors to try to help frame what your coachee is saying. You're acknowledging, you're summarizing, you're paraphrasing some of the different things that we saw modeled during our synchronous class. You're pausing to wait. You're waiting for them to think. You're also pausing so that they can absorb this information and kind of think about this information a little bit. And you're moving them from this existing state that they're in to their desired state with a clear plan, with some deep reflection, and with those higher states of mind that we also talked about last week, that idea of consciousness, craftsmanship, flexibility, efficacy, and interdependence. So as you are listening to the inner state of your coachee, you also want to double check your own inner state, state, what you're thinking and where you are, and you want to check your assumptions and any presuppositions that you might have, and you want to keep those presuppositions positive. So one of the themes that's starting to evolve in our class is this idea of positive outlook and positivity, and we'll have somewhat of a capstone to those conversations in week 14 when we have our synchronous class on appreciative inquiry. The idea is that you're asking those kind of Fran Peavy strategic questions, right? What are some of the goals? You're keeping them open-ended. What are some of your impressions? What do you want to be aware of? What are you aware of? And how has this conversation been helpful for you? These are based on positive presuppositions and positive assumptions, rather than the sort of more prescriptive, you should have listened, and the objective that I've provided you is much better than yours. You want to elicit thinking on your coachee's part so that they're able to come up with some solutions on their own and some ideas on their own on how they can develop better performance. So remember those coaching behaviors that we talked about before: the paraphrase, the summary, the pause, the probe, asking a question. What did you mean? How did that work? And you're also providing some data and some resources. So you might be saying, well, in this particular case, here's something that's helped me or helped the teacher down the hall, or there's a teacher down the hall that's had some of the same issues. You and they might want to get together to see how you can solve things. So there are a lot of these different kinds of thoughts that are going through your mind as a coach, as you're listening, as you're working through the conversation with your coachee. Don't stress about it. Try the behavior. Definitely summarize and paraphrase, because that's important for people, as we know, to understand that they're being listened to and that they're being heard. But don't stress about doing all the different things that we'll be talking about in this PowerPoint, and all the other aspects of coaching that you might need to keep in mind. This takes a lot of practice. Like listening, this takes practice. So try it out, guess and check, and see if at least the frame of the different coaching conversations can work for you. So the reflecting conversation essentially follows this kind of a format. Once the observation is complete, you're going to be asking your coachees, your teachers, to reflect on the class. And there are some similar steps to the planning conversation. You're basing your or you're asking your colleague to base their reflections on what actually happens. So the first question is, well, how did the class go? What did you think about the class? What sorts of things went on during the class that you want to highlight? So you're getting them and engaging them in talking about the class that you observed. The next step is to analyze those causal factors. So, why do you think that happened? Or what are some of the reasons why that may have taken place? So you're listening for what's going on or what's been happening. You're listening to the different points in the observation, the different points from the lesson that your teachers are focused on, that they're describing, and that's going to lead you into thinking about what the next phase of learning could be for them. So you want to help them describe what's happened. So you observed a lesson where there was group work, and it could even be someone disengaged from the group work, and your teacher talks about that. How come you think that happened? What are some of the reasons why you think there was some disengagement, or those students were wandering around rather than participating in groups? So you want to get to that and have your coachee analyze those understandings. From those causal factors, you're going to construct new learning. So you're going to build and have them say what they will do. What kinds of changes can they make to their group dynamics to make sure that that they have all their materials when they get into the group? So everybody needs a pencil. Well, so and so didn't have a pencil, so we wandered off, and the group started to break down. Have your coachee look at that, describe the causal factor, describe what they might do to change, and have them construct that new learning. So does that sound like something you can do next time to improve the way you develop groups? And have them commit to that application, i.e., is this something that you can commit yourself to? Is this something you want to do in order to improve your teaching down the road? So get them to say, this is something that's important to me. I can see where it would improve my teaching performance. And yes, next time I'm going to make sure that in my directions, everybody's bringing a pencil with them into the groups, so that their materials and their supplies are all in their groups, and they don't have to disengage or worry about not having what they need. And then at the end of the conversation, there's that same question: how is this helpful for you? And of course, as we said on Wednesday, this is an important part of the conversation because you're working on helping your coachee consolidate the learning so that they're able to speak to what they learned, what they discovered, and what kinds of commitments they've made to improve performance. So the next conversation that I want to talk about beyond the reflecting conversation is this problem-solving conversation, which is about someone saying to you, my class is really struggling with fluency. I have them read, and it doesn't seem to be working out very well. So you hear that that's a problem that can be solved, and you can engage your colleague, your teacher, in solving that particular problem. In all of these conversations, and in the problem-solving conversation, you do want to be aware of those 5 holonymous states of mind: efficacy, consciousness, craftsmanship, and flexibility, and also interdependence. So know those, think about them, and as much as possible, again, don't stress about it, but look to check and look to see if there's a particular direction in which your coachee wants to go toward one of these basic states of mind. As you're talking to the coachee, you've got the different sorts of conversational tactics that you can use. In other words, in that problem solving conversation, you can say, you know, pose a data search and ask them if they could find out more about that. There are, you know, potentially for fluency, maybe there's a teacher down the hall who does fluency very, very well, and you can suggest to your colleague that that person connect with that teacher because you've seen them in their fluency lessons and they seem to do this pretty well. You're looking for more data. You know, what else is going in your class? How do you know about the struggles with fluency? What kinds of assessments are you using? So you're asking them to probe. You can probe their thinking and pose a search or ask different questions that invite some greater analysis. Looking at different connections. You know, what did you expect would happen as you did that fluency lesson? What were you hoping for? How did the fluency lesson connect with some of your objectives for the lesson? So those are some questions that you can ask. What's the point of view, or what's fluency like for your students? How is your teaching fluency? You know, how do they express that? How are they involved? So from their perspective, what are those fluency lessons like? This is a set of questions that I really like because, like Fran Peavy and strategic questions, they really open up the possibility of having some positive outcomes too. Like, if in the best of all possible worlds, what would that fluency be? What would that fluency lesson be like? What would you be looking for? How can you? What would a perfect fluency lesson look like and sound like if you were to undertake one of those? So this is a nice kind of tactic to get your colleagues thinking from a much bigger perspective and sort of scanning the horizon for different potential problem solutions that might be there in their experiences. And you're also, you know, sort of probing, or you can probe the importance of some of these things. You know, you value that student perspective. You know, how is that? What is that about your makeup as a teacher that you're able to express and might be able to help you with a potential solution? You can also look at choices from among different alternatives. You know, how might you do that differently? And which one of those particular alternatives that you just mentioned might be most effective. Remember, as you go through, again, don't stress, but be aware of the fact that facial expressions, eye movements, we saw some beamers in the example that we worked through on Wednesday. So looking at how people's eyes are shifting, what their silence is like, what their breathing patterns are like. Again, you know, you want to move yourself into as much of a mirror of these kinds of behaviors as you're seeing, so that you're developing some comfort, and you're also working your way into your colleagues' thinking, so that you're really aware of, you know, that suddenly closed posture. You know that they're defensive about something, or they're not really thinking things through. So that's a point to relax them, to kind of mirror that, but also engage them so that they're more open to thinking and talking about and developing some of the solutions that you're after. And remember that there are values in all of these and different teacher beliefs that are going to come out through these different indicators. Your problem-solving solution mirrors some of the same kinds of tactics that we've seen in the other two conversations that we've talked about. The first thing is you're going to honor the existing state. Wow, that sounds really frustrating that your students can't really get a handle on fluency. What's your desired state? What is the best kind of fluency lesson that you can have, and how would that change for you, or what would that be like? So you're going from the existing state to the desired state almost immediately in the problem-solving conversation. And here's what happened. You're frustrated, you're angry. You're watching for that red in your conversations also, based on your practice with listening, and you're framing that desired state and helping your colleague understand sort of what their gap is and where some of the problem is. So what can you do to do better? What can you do to get to that desired state? Well, maybe one of the things I can do is put my students in pairs or do readers theater so that they're able to be more fluent with one another before they're fluent with me in their testing. Maybe I could provide more group work or more pairs work in order to develop fluency. When you hear that, you can think about the potential to develop that or help your colleague develop that. And the other thing to think about is that you don't have to, that coaching is an ongoing conversation. It's the development of a relationship with a teacher and with your teachers. So you don't have to solve everything or help your colleagues solve everything right away. You can say, I see that. Let me get back to you. I think I might be able to find some resources for you. But you definitely want to locate them and you want to amplify them somehow. You do want to check for congruence. Does that sound like a good idea? Does it sound as if you're doing readers theater more often might help with the fluency in your class? And sort of check to see if that lands for the coachee and if that's something that your coachee can use. And then at the end, how was this process helpful for you? You definitely want them to summarize and sort of bring their thinking into a mindset or a way of thinking that summarizes for them what they've learned and what they can use. So this particular conversation is designed to take 5 minutes. That sounds frustrating. You're feeling this way. Because the fluency lesson didn't work well, or your third graders aren't as fluent as you'd like, and you'd like them to be more fluent, and you'd like to do that with more pairs, more readers theater, more ability for them to read to one another during the class. So you're looking for that way to make it happen. How was this helpful for you? Does that sound right? You're going to check for congruence. You're going to say, I can get you some resources, or, the teacher down the hall, they have a good grip on doing some of that readers theater. You may want to join their class as a literacy specialist. You might have seen that, and that could move you toward that desired state. And remember about getting to yes, because when you hear that, then you can become a little more prescriptive. You can provide some advice. Always check for congruence and see if it lands well. As coaches, you're going to have to suspend a lot of your normal desires as a conversationalist, as a person who talks to other people. You don't have to get to closure right away. This doesn't have to be resolved in a single conversation. I'll get back to you tomorrow and let's keep talking, so that you also have time to develop some resources and see where things could go in order to help your colleague. Sometimes your conversations might be uncomfortable. You also might be, as you're talking through these coaching conversations, a little bit unsure and a little bit ambivalent about potential directions to engage your coachee about. So you're going to feel that ambiguity in your conversation, and that's okay. And sometimes you have to give up your own desire to understand and really get into the mindset of your coachee, so that person can develop their performance and improve their performance based on their own understanding, based on what you can bring forward in their thinking as you're coaching them. So that's a very, very quick, down and dirty overview of two more coaching conversations. The reflecting conversation will obviously be very important for you, for your coaching video and for your final project, because a lot of your in-service thinking and a lot of the professional learning that you'll be providing can also come from that particular source. So I'm going to let you go. I hope this has been helpful for you. One of the most meaningful aspects for me of teaching and being with teachers, of leading organizations, and working in leadership capacities as well as teaching in classrooms, one of the most meaningful things for me has been teacher talk. There is something about teachers talking with one another, having conversations, discussing tactics, discussing strategies, discussing how to improve performance that I always found in my professional life very meaningful, very rich, and very important. And it's one of the great things about teaching that you can share that teacher talk with one another. So please enjoy your conversations, enjoy your coaching conversations. Don't stress. Use that handout that I gave you last week that kind of captures what the conversations are like, what the holonomous states of mind are like, what the different kinds of coaching behaviors are like. Utilize those as you're talking to your coachees, and see if you can't develop this coaching frame and this coaching mindset with your teachers so that you continue and engage them and instill in them also the value of talking as teachers and reflecting as professionals. So with that, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for listening and paying attention. I hope this has been helpful. By all means, email me if you have questions, and I'll say bye-bye for now.